Welcome to Modern Mom Probs, where we're trying to solve the world's modern mom problems. And if we can't do that, at least we're having fun talking about them. I'm Tara Clark. Let's go. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tara. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. We're going to be chatting about all things only children. You know, I'm an only child with an only child, which you don't always hear about, but you're going to hear a lot about it today. So get ready. Now,
Awesome.
But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask a little bit about your backstory, how you started the Only Hearts Club. Tell me all the things.
Sure. So my backstory is I am not an only child. I have a sister who I'm actually very close to. And I think, when you have siblings, it's easy to sort of say, okay, well, that's the same structure that I want for my own family. But I would say for me, I never really had a lot of family planning in mind when I was growing up. And then I think and I'm sure we'll get into this a bit later, but when I was pregnant, I knew before I even had my child that this was going to be my one and only. So I was very steadfast in that decision. And in terms of how I got started with the Only Hearts Club, it actually started as a different account altogether. It was called One Airplane Row because I had heard something from someone a while ago that was like it was a family of 3, and she was saying she really loved it because it allowed her family to just all share one airplane row when they traveled.
So true. As somebody who travels pretty often with my husband and son, we are in fact one airplane row. God, I'd never thought about that.
Right. And it's amazing because I'm someone who loves to travel. We've been traveling with my son as well. And I'm hoping to do more of it as he gets older. And so for me, I just thought that's me. I'm like one airplane row. So it started as one airplane row, maybe 3 years ago. I did one post. I never touched it again. And then I'm not even sure how it progressed from that to the Only Hearts Club, but I will say the Only Hearts Club really feels so much more like me. And it's just, even being able to do the branding around it and then being able to reach out to different women who are also in a similar situation to me, it just somehow came together very organically over time. I would say at the beginning, I was like a little less frequent with my posting, and it started as a Facebook group local to Toronto. Because what I was looking to do initially was just to get mothers of only children in the city together for different events and just gatherings, because I think that there was a real lack of a sense of community for mothers of onlys, whether it was by choice or it's by circumstance. I just wanted a safe, welcoming space for women to gather. And so it started as this local Facebook group. And then I started to think, okay, maybe I can take that from Facebook to Instagram. And as someone who, again, I've worked around the world, I've traveled so much, I've been so exposed to different people, different places and cultures. I just thought, okay, how do I maybe take this from this local group and start to really expand it to other women across the world? And that's really how it came together. And it went from being this really, really small community to this community that is growing, by the hour, by the day. And I think what it is like there's a real need for it, right? Not just for families of only children, but specifically for mothers of only children, because we go through a unique experience. We're often the ones that are questioned about it, more so than I think, in heterosexual relationships. If a man is, I think women are the ones who get the brunt of the questions, or when is your next one coming along? And I wanted to have a safe, inclusive, kind of like, for lack of a better way of putting it, like a cool mom's space for moms of onlys around the world. And I think that's what I'm doing. And I hope that I'm doing that. And I hope first and foremost for me, it needs to feel safe. Like that's my number one. I think that's the cancer in me. Like I want to create community. I want to, I just want people, like women, to feel like they're cared for, because they are. And every person that follows Only Hearts Club, I'm so, so grateful for that follow. It doesn't matter how big the account gets. I will never feel like it. Sometimes it's this imposter syndrome of you're following my account. It's a really cool feeling. And I feel a responsibility to these women.
I think that is incredible. That's what caught my eye about your account, how heartfelt it was, how honest your posts are. I mean, obviously, I always have an affinity towards moms of onlys as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes it's selection bias, but I had recently been seeing a lot more posts about moms of onlys. That there was this one mom who, I don't follow her, but she came up in my feed as far as like the reel, and she was talking about how much she loves having an only child, to which I commented, as an only child with an only child, I love this message, or something along those lines. My comment got like 1,200 likes.
Mm-hmm.
And that blew my mind because what that means is that her video has millions and millions and millions of views because my one stupid little comment, like obviously like popped off too, which just goes to show there's so many people thinking about this right now. And in terms of the YouTube videos that I have of being a mom of an only and the conversations that I've had, I think I've had 3. This is my 3rd, 3 altogether in the last, let's say 6 years. Those tend to be my single most popular YouTube videos, conversations, podcast episodes, because people have so many questions. And I think people are often either questioning themselves or they are on the receiving end of these questions. And so that's why I'm glad that we're here to talk about it, to like lay it all out there. And your account does such a beautiful job of going through the questions that I'm sure you've probably heard many times. And you have so many like answers. It's like point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. And I just think you do such a beautiful job of laying that all out.
Thank you. Yeah. And I would say as well, I think maybe one of the reasons, I'm sure there's many reasons why, those videos that you've done and hopefully this episode will also do well, is because I think that women are also looking for, and to some degree, some validation, right, in their decision. They want to know that they are in good company. Mm-hmm. And even when you look around your own community, I would say, so I'm living in downtown Toronto, and I think being in an urban space, you do tend to see more one-child families just because, like the lifestyles that we live, it's not so uncommon here. But even when I say that, a lot of my friends, all of my friends have at least 2 kids, at the minimum 2 kids. I feel alone at times, and to be able to actually have other people around me where I feel more like that connection. I almost feel sometimes more connected to women who decide not to have kids at all than those who have bigger families. Because I think we go through a lot of the same questions. It's like, you're selfish. Why don't you have another child? Why are you not gifting your child a sibling? It's a lot of the same questions that I think women who are child-free receive, maybe not the one about the siblings, but certainly about that question around selfishness. And, you're only thinking about yourself in this whole equation.
Yeah, absolutely. When my son was born, we were living in New York City. We were living in Manhattan at the time. So I understand completely about the urban considerations of having more than one child. And that actually like played into it a little bit to a certain extent for us. I'll backtrack and I'm going to share my story about how we had my son, but I'm going to condense it because that story in and of itself is a very long story, but I'm going to shrink it down to speed it up for context.
Great.
So it is such a long story that there are other podcast episodes about that. If anyone wants to listen, feel free to listen. I share, especially on a podcast called Infertility Stories. I tell the entire thing. It's like an hour-long story with all the details. For the purposes of time, I'm just going to say that my husband and I, unfortunately, had a really hard time having my son, and I suffered several miscarriages and then unexplained infertility and then 3 IUIs. And then on the 3rd IUI, they were like, if this one doesn't work, then you're going to have to go to IVF. And luckily, it worked with Jack. I was able to have him, carry him. Now he is 13 years old, and that's a very long story in a very short time. At one point, we were at our fertility specialist's office at 6:00 in the morning because in New York City, they open up very early before people go to work. So we were there one time doing numbers, blood tests, any number of things that we were doing. And I remember my husband and I were saying to each other, because during a situation like this, we were so desperate. We knew we wanted to become parents. We were trying very hard. We also at the same time were like, well, maybe we just won't be. Maybe we'll be child-free and travel and be those cool city people. There was a lot of different things that we were going through, but we really wanted to give it a final go. We were like trying really hard. We took off for a year because it was so emotionally draining. And then we tried again afterwards. And so with this last round of trying, we said, we will never ask for anything ever again. If we just get this one healthy child, we'll never ask for anything. We won't unbalance the scales of blessings or luck or fate or any of those things. We're just asking for this one wish. And then we got him. And then we said, we're never going to ask for anything ever again. So that was it. I mean, obviously I'm making light of it, but at the time we were literally like pleading with the heavens to, just try to have this family. And that played a certain part into it. The infertility and the pregnancy loss and the miscarriages were so devastating that played a part of it. Living in New York City, where we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and that played a part into it. My son had terrible tantrums when he was about 18 months old to about 3.5. That played a part into it. So when people choose to only have one child, there are many factors that go into it. It's not just a very cut and dry, well, this is what we want to do and this is what we have to do. There's a lot of choices. There's a lot of things that go, like I said, factors that go into the decision to have the family structure that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And go ahead, please.
So I was going to say, did any of that resonate with you in your story?
It does. I mean, it's funny because I used to live in New York as well. I always envisioned that when I had a child, one day I was interning for a magazine there. And my publisher had 2 kids that she was raising in Soho. And I just thought, when I have kids one day, I'm going to live in New York and I'm going to have my kids and they're going to go on the subway. And I feel like I'm living maybe like a less chaotic version of that here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I think because the way the city is set up, like there are, it's not like just like the brownstones or the apartments here. It's like you have like proper like dwellings here that are still somewhat more affordable, although a bit debatable than they are in New York. So we're in a 3-bedroom here in Toronto, and we live in a really, really great neighborhood. Still, I mean, we have an extra space for guests and for an office, right? There's not a whole lot of extra living space in here. And I even think if we had more, look, there are people that live in, smaller families and less, right? But for us, this felt like, very much more managed. And I will say too, what I don't relate to, which I think is interesting, is like, my son was for the most part, a really easy kid, right? Like we didn't go through the tantrum phase. I'm still waiting for like the terrible 2s or like the 3-nager years, and they never came. And still, it's like, I'm not willing to press my luck. I'm like, I feel like I have this kid who, don't get me wrong, absolutely has tantrums and, can go crazy sometimes. But for the most part, like he's a pretty easygoing kid. I not to take that for granted because I feel like as a unit, we just have a really, really good thing going on. And I'm not willing to rock the boat. Like I don't want to test it out. I had which I've talked about before, I had a great labor and delivery. I had a great pregnancy, to the moment that I went into labor, my pregnancy, except for my first trimester, which I think is pretty standard, that it's not always great. Beyond that, everything was like very smooth sailing for me. I went into labor on my due date. Like he was just like a very punctual, and that's like 4% of kids. He was very punctual. I think it's the Taurus in him. I'm not normally, I think I was never into like signs until my son came along, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, horoscopes. But it's, just like an easy, pretty much for the most part, all the way through. And I'm not someone who likes, I guess I can take risks to a point, but when it comes to my family, I'm a little bit more risk adverse. And I just don't think that I don't think I would cope well with another child. I'm at my limit right now. I'm at my capacity with my one, and I'm not willing to take the risk for my own mental health, for my own well-being, for my child's well-being, to bring another child into this world. Plus, the world is a pretty fragile place right now. And, I think even for me, coping with having to raise one well, that is what I can do. And I think I can do it well. If I was to expand on that, I don't know what would be, but I feel like it, that I know myself well enough. And I talk about this a lot on my account as well. And I think a lot of other women that follow can relate to this. It's like, I know myself really well, and I'm type A, and it's just, I'm worried about what would be with more. And so right now this feels like a bit of a sweet spot for me.
Yeah, that completely resonates with me. And when you said don't rock the boat, that's exactly how I felt. And some people may argue differently. And this is our experience and our story, right? And that was a big part of it, is that, we're just like new parents and trying to do the best we can and trying to just hang in there in survival mode. And we didn't want to rock the boat. And like I said, whether the tantrums, what it was, my son was having such bad tantrums. I wasn't even thinking about sex or anything like that. That's how far away, like we were in like such survival mode that like having another child was like literally the last thing in my mind at that point. Cause like every day just felt like survival. And so Yeah, that just happened to be our story. But I'm thinking about your posts because they're so insightful. And like I said, they're so heartfelt. There's one in particular that you were talking about, and you just referenced it here, knowing yourself, and then combating that with the questions that you receive. What are some of those questions that people ask you point blank? Like, hey, Jackie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think within my own family, I would say my family is pretty understanding because I've always been very confident. And I think that's one thing that I try to also emanate a little bit when I post is like, I really do want women to feel more confident. I don't want them to feel like they have to justify their decision because I try not to. But I also recognize that in some ways, I feel like I'm in a bit of like, I don't want to necessarily say like a unique position, but I also know that I haven't necessarily dealt with all the questions that I know are out there. That being said, people that don't know me as well, or friends that have more kids, will sometimes say it's like, oh, you'll change your mind. Like that's a big one,
Is that a big one? That's interesting.
yeah. Or, it's like, come on, like, what's another one? Like that I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but that's kind of what they're getting at. Cause I think to some degree it's projecting, right? It's like you want to see that other people are doing what you're doing, even if you're exhausted, even if you feel like you're over your head. It's like, come in, like, come into these deep waters with me.
Drowning. I want you to come with me.
That's kind of how it feels sometimes. And it's just, I think those are some of the things I get. It's either strangers, or like neighbors who will say, oh, they'll have multiple kids and maybe they'll be a little bit older. I think the older generation too, because it was more common in an older generation. The world is different now, I think. I mean, I wasn't around a few generations ago, but we can assume that like things were a bit different, right? It's just the world is moving very quickly. And, we can talk about like internet, AI, all that stuff, which is, another conversation for another day, but things are moving really quickly. And so I think with the way that things are changing, older generations kind of are still stuck in that mindset of, buying the house, and having multiple kids and one income. It's like, that's not the way things are anymore. Maybe for a very, very small subset of people in the world, yes. But for the most part, it's just not the way the world works anymore. And so it's kind of having to combat some of those questions. And it's having to speak to like I said, to friends that maybe have more and kind of joke around about it. But like maybe there's that degree of like, they're not kidding and they're kind of hoping that you'll kind of experience what they're experiencing. And so that's what I go through. But look, there's all kinds of other pressures and questions from people. And I know what they are because even if I haven't experienced them myself, other women have told them to me, or I've seen it, in media, right? It's like, it's still such a hot topic. And there's a show here in Canada. It's kind of like the same type of idea as The View. It's not quite that. I would say it's more of like, it's less current affairs and more, just like chit chat. I don't want to say it, there's some of that too, but it's, I think of the four that are the four hosts on the show, one, at the very least, one of them is child free and two of them are also moms to only children. And they talk about it on the show as well. Right. So it's just, I think that the conversations are happening more frequently and you'll hear about some of the questions that are had. But even then, I think it's easy to second guess ourselves because it's like, we see what's out there. We see, what's being shown like in pop culture and everything. And you want to give your child the best, like whatever that looks like. And I think it can be both like external pressures, but also internal pressures of like, am I doing right by my child? And I think that's something that even though I'm very confident, there are moments where I struggle with that. It's like, you kind of wonder about the alternative, or I see my son being this like very kind, compassionate, warm, social child. And I just think he would make the best big brother. I see him with his nephew. It was his nephew with his cousin, my nephew, with his cousin who's like 8 months old. And he's just so loving and tender. And like you have those glimpses and those glimmers of like, well, what could be? Like he would be so wonderful. But then you come back to okay, I know all the reasons why this wouldn't work for our family. And you have to kind of just stick to your guns upon some self-reflection, some introspection, and like what is best for you. And I think if you can come back to that, you have your answer.
That's it. You have your answer. I'm going to latch on to one thing you said about giving your child the best, you had said. And many different people can take that phrase to mean many different things.
Absolutely.
What does that mean to you? And I'm going to share what that means to me.
Yeah, I would love to hear what it means to you. So I think what it means to me is just the ability to be present, like quite frankly. The presence for me is huge. It's like I posted a reel yesterday and just about how like from one moment I was holding him in my arms, like he was small enough to just fit comfortably in my arms. And then like I feel like I blinked and all of a sudden it's like he's this kid riding around on his bike, not even having training wheels, and just like he's so independent. But then I think about the fact like, yes, in one hand, it's sad that it goes by so quickly. On the other hand, I'm like, I've been there for every single moment of it, right? I've never had to. I started to reflect on, okay, what if, he's going to be 5 in 2 weeks. What if we had had another baby when he was 3 or even, 4? Now it's like all of a sudden the time that I'm able to devote to him. And I don't think he's not a spoiled kid. Like maybe he's spoiled for our attention. He's not spoiled for material things. And all of a sudden that would be taken away. But I love those moments that we have together. Like I love the fact that he can just run into my arms on the couch and snuggle with me. And like, I'm not going to have to be pulled away because there's a baby that needs me. It's just, we have undivided attention. And there's something that I think is so beautiful about that. And it really allows us to deepen our connection between, parent and child. That's the first thing. The second thing for me is like, quite frankly, it's my mental health, right? I need to be well. And I'm also someone who really does cherish my alone time. I want to go to the gym. I want to go for a run. I want to go shopping or grab coffee with a friend. And, you can say that's selfish if you want to, but for me, it's self-care. And when I have self-care, I'm a better parent. I'm a better mom to my son. So those are the two things I think that really do mean it's like being present and also just being able to take care of myself, I think make me a better parent.
That you took the words right out of my mouth, Jackie. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say for us, it's being present for him. It's being all in. It's giving him not only the attention, obviously, but also the resources that we're able to, if he needs to buy something new, if we want to go on a family vacation, all of those things. And not that a family vacation is the end all be all, but creating memories and doing things together is really important to us. It's a really big family value of ours. We're lucky that we're able to be in that position. Now, my parents were divorced when I was 2. So I didn't have any siblings because my mom never remarried. My dad did, but never had more children. So here I am as an only child. And that was an interesting experience because I was grateful for being an only child because I knew that I had limited resources growing up. I lived with my mom and she worked extraordinarily hard to be able to keep the lights on and food on the table and all of that kind of stuff. And I was often very grateful for being an only child, knowing that I wouldn't have to share food, resources, those types of things with somebody else. And luckily, I'm not in that position now for our son. So, he's able to get all of our attention and our resources. But that's definitely a consideration, or at least I know that was a consideration of mine growing up. And I loved being an only child. I loved the independence. I loved the freedom. And again, growing up in the 80s and 90s is different.
Yeah.
Than growing up now. But we were free. We were out there riding our bikes and hanging out and walking to the store by ourselves, all those things. So maybe we should try to bring back some of those 90s summers. I'd love to. I would love to.
I'm trying to do that. I mean, even with my son's birthday coming up, it's like we're doing, this is the 5th year that we've done a house party. Well, no, the first year we did it away, but the next years we did it at home. And it's like, I love the idea of I think people go all out. And to be fair, I do a lot of really nice things at home, but I love the idea of just house things or just like the 90s block parties. I wish we could go back to that time in some ways.
Me too. No, I agree 1,000%. And I was lucky enough to grow up with my cousin, who was also an only child, and she and I were very close growing up. So we were 2 only children who came together and we were practically like sisters. And I think not enough is spoken about the importance of extended family for only children, whether it be cousins or nephews or neighbors, anything like that. You mentioned your nephew. Do you have other family in the area?
So I guess that's another reason why we are one and done. And I think maybe some people can relate to this. Others might not be able to. But so my husband is from Havana, Cuba. So all of his family,
what? My cousin, her mother is actually from Havana.
Really?
The cousin that I was just mentioning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting because in Cuba in the 90s with the special period, there were a lot of families that had only children. And my husband's family was one of those. So my husband's also an only child. And that's just because I actually think it's really interesting. I kind of compare the 90s, like the special period in Cuba sort of to what we're going through right now in the world, like I think we are in an extended special period in this world, where like there are so many challenges, not just there, but in, in other parts of North America and just globally, we're just really challenged as a world right now. So it's kind of like our own special period. But I will say that, because my son's grandparents are in Cuba and then other family is like around the world, we only in Canada, we have my parents who are divorced. So I grew up, until I was 15, they were together. After that, I had two different families. And then my sister lives close by, which is really wonderful. So our nephew is around. But beyond that, I think one of the things that I really do try to encourage as well is, this idea of what does family mean, right? Because family, I think we define it as like blood related, but family can mean so much more than that. I look at my sister and I are very close, but I have my best girlfriends who are like my sisters, and it for me, it's more than just like, what is like the bloodline, in that sense, it's like, who else are you close to? And I really try to nurture and encourage the relationships that my son has with his friends, because I want those to be like his family in a lot of ways. We do a lot of play dates and, he has friends from like when he was really little. And I really, really try to nurture those friendships for him because he really likes those kids. And so I think it's just not only defining your family as who you related to by blood. If you have that, wonderful. I have friends who have very, very big families and they're very close. But that being said, there are people out there that are not close to their family. And, it is what it is. And so you have to find other ways to be able to build relationships, to make those relationships central to your child's life and to your life. Because I think when your child sees you being social, having relationships, having friendships, that allows them to see, how beautiful that can be and how significant that can be in your life. So however your family looks, sorry, I have a cold right now. I'm a little slurry. I apologize.
No, you're fine. No, you're totally good, Jack. Don't worry.
However your family looks, it's like you, that's great. Just have people in your life that love you and that you love, and then nurture those relationships.
I agree 1,000%. You have to be very intentional about it, right? Like, whereas if you had siblings and you're all living in the house together, like you have, and I'm using this in quotes, sort of built-in friends. However, I know plenty of families where the children or even adult siblings don't get along. They're estranged. They don't talk, all different things like that. I've seen that time and time again. Not that I'm saying that one maybe is more frequent than the other. I don't know. I don't have the data on that. I would have to look it up and come back to you on that one. But I see that so frequently. And I also never wanted that to be part of our lives and our dynamic.
I think you touched on something that's really important, which again is something that comes up time and time again on my own account, which is like this idea of, as I mentioned earlier, like gifting your child a sibling, and this idea that like it's a built-in best friend. And I really want to debunk that, because I think that, yes, it's possible that, you could end up being best friends with your sibling. But that's a lot of pressure too on that relationship. And it doesn't always work out that way. So it's that idea of like nature versus nurture, right? Like you could have a sibling who you have nothing in common with. And then you get older, your parents get older, and like life happens and you don't end up being close, or even worse, you end up fighting over things, or you end up not talking to each other anymore. So I think, to have another child just to give your child someone like a play date every day, if that is your sole reason for having another child, fine. I mean, that's good for you, but it wasn't for me. It's like, I know a lot of really fractured sibling relationships, even within my own family. I have seen it in my own family. Mm-hmm. And so Same. It's not always the case that like, they're best friends with the other. They just like adore each other. Maybe, but maybe not. And then the pressure of that too can be so significant, because then you think you failed as parents, or you think, that is a sibling you failed if you don't get along with, your sibling or your siblings. So to me, that's something that comes up frequently. And I think that we need to be really mindful of the fact that like, it's a hope, but it's never a guarantee. And not go in with that mindset of like, it's an automatic thing and it's inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a tweet that every time I see it, it makes me laugh. I think it's by the Rambling Mama, and it says, "Go play with your sister. That's why we had her."
Yeah. But it's true. And you see a lot of those things. You see a lot of those like reels or like, memes online about that where, like moms come out and they're like, I really, I had my second child because I really wanted my first child to have like a best friend. And all they do is fight. And they say it in a funnier way than that, but it's kind of like, I mean, look, I get it, like kind of going back to what we said earlier, like I have friends who have, multiple kids and like it totally works for them. And also like they're a different kind of mom than I am. They're a different kind of parent than I am. They in some ways, I don't want to say like they revel in the chaos, but they probably deal better with chaos than I do. And I like peace in my home. I like quiet. I want quiet in my home. When the day is over and I'm exhausted, I don't want to have to start, breaking up like a fist fight in my house. Like, let it be quiet, let it be calm, let my child play, on his own, learn to enjoy his own company. If you're someone who it tolerates, and I'll use the word tolerate, I think love might be a bit of an extreme, but if you're someone who tolerates chaos better than someone like me does, amazing, and that's great in terms of your family unit. But I don't want that chaos, that potential chaos in my home. I need the quiet. And that's something that it's a hill I'm willing to die on.
No, I'm with you. The two of us are on top of that hill together. So I get that. Do you ever hear that people sometimes say like, oh, you're less of a mother because you only have one child?
I wouldn't say, not personally. I know a lot of women do get that. I would say more so, oh, you have it so easy. It's just one. It's so easy. And maybe to a point that there is some accuracy in that, because in some ways it is easier, right? Like for all the reasons I've just explained, there are things that are easier about it. That being said, there are moments where it's not that easy. I mean, I think being a parent, no matter what you do, it's not easy being a parent. Once you have a child who you are fully mentally, financially responsible for, there is nothing easy about that, right? So no, I would say I'm like a hard no to it's easy. Is it easier in some ways? Sure. In some ways, it's probably less easy because you're also having to be, that child's play date, when no one else is around to hang out with them. They want to show you everything. They want to do everything with you. You kind of become like their built-in best buddy at home, right? Only way that I would say it can be easier is because we have one. So it's like if it's not my husband that's hanging out, then I will, or vice versa. So it's kind of like we're like tag teaming with our kid. But that being said, like, yes, I mean, like there is not another child around to maybe take some of that focus away so that like they're just kind of hanging out with each other when they're getting along. So those moments I would say can be tough. And then there's all the other times too, right? Like we got a call from his school that he was being like a bit disruptive in one of his classes. It's like having to have conversations with the teachers. It's all those things. I would say, yeah, I mean, that's not easy. I would rather not have to deal with that, but it's just part and parcel with being, that's what my grandmother would say, part and parcel with being, I love, right. I'm going back to her.
I love that.
I love you, Bubby. Part and parcel with, being a parent is like you have those responsibilities and you can't relinquish those responsibilities. So no, it's not easy. But I would say going back to your original question, even though I haven't, heard it's like you're like less of a mom, I know a lot of people deal with it. And I would say those two kind of go hand in hand. It's really easy or you're less than a mom kind of go together.
Yeah. I've heard that. Maybe not me personally, but I've definitely seen that in content online. So clearly people are talking about that. They're having those kinds of conversations.
What do you hear? And I'm also just curious, do you ever get responses to some of the comments that you make on your social media?
Excellent question. Anytime that I will comment on someone's post about it, like let's say perhaps I am not making a post about being an only child or having an only child, but if I comment on someone else's post, I receive so much wonderful support. People are like, thank you. Like, as you mentioned earlier on, they're looking for validation. They're looking for validation in their decisions, or somehow they're saying, are we going to go this way? Are we going to go that way? And when I add my 2 cents, and my 2 cents are very positive when it comes to only children families, I think people appreciate that very much. But for me personally, I'm trying to think of in my life. I'll never forget this. I was at the hospital. I had just had my son. He was breech. So he was a planned C-section. And the day we were leaving the hospital, our nurse, the nurse in my room was like, all right, hopefully we'll see you next year with another baby. Yeah. There's no way in hell you're going to see me next year. It was not going to happen. So I thought that was funny, but it also sort of like I was taken back by it, but she was, she was being lighthearted and she was making a joke. And I guess it's good for her to keep getting more moms in Mount Sinai Hospital.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
yes, so that one was probably the first time I had ever heard that, because I literally had a baby for about 4 days before I heard like, you're going to have another one.
Mhm.
I luckily, I have not heard much about that. And I wonder if it's because I'm an only child with an only child who has a cousin who is an only child, who my husband's cousin is also an only child. So it's fairly common in my family. So it's not that it's like so egregious. My one uncle does have 5 kids. So like my one uncle had 5 kids, and then my mom had one, and then her other brother had one. So I don't know. We don't really come from such a huge family where people were like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
what's next? I don't know. I have to say I'm pretty lucky in terms of that. No one really said anything to me point blank, except for the nurse on the delivery floor.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting as you're talking about like not coming from a very big family, because on my mom's side, especially, not my dad's side, my dad is also an only child, but my mom's side, if you like look back a couple of generations, like the families were quite big. Like my grandma had 5 or 6 siblings. My grandfather had 3. And then as you went down like the generational line, it started to get like smaller and smaller. Like, so even for my mom's cousins, some of them had 3 or 4. My mom had 2. So did my aunt. But even now I look at my generation, which I think kind of does speak a little bit more to like, again, going through generationally how things are shifting. And my generation of like all of my extended cousins, because I come from like a Jewish family and then Jewish Judaism, it's like you, my third cousins, in some ways, some of them feel like my first cousins, because that's just how things work, I guess. But like the way that I'm looking around and the families are just getting so much smaller. And like even some of my cousins, both my first and my like, extended, who are around my age, give or take 3 to 5 years, either like don't have any kids at all and will not be having kids, or have one child like me. The odd person in my family has 2 in this generation, but like that's it. That's the max, is 2. So you see it changing and shifting through the generations.
Yeah, no, you definitely can. It's interesting. So my husband has one brother who is child-free by choice. They are married and they're child-free by choice. So yeah, I mean, that's just within our small little family itself. So my other cousin that I mentioned, that she and I grew up very close, she has 4 kids. Her husband grew up as one of 4, and now they have 4. So it was interesting that they sort of modeled more after what he grew up with.
And that happens sometimes. Is like you will see like, people that grew up as only children having larger families. But I would say more frequently, I've seen only children have only children, which is really interesting. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't have the data on it, but like I know a lot of only children who also have only children. So, I mean, I guess it could go either way.
Right. It definitely could go either way. Yeah. It was a good experience for me. And so, like I said, if anything, I only ever wanted a cool older brother to hang out with, like the cool older brother friends.
Yeah.
But I can't control that.
That you definitely can't control that. If you had said you wanted like a cool younger brother, I will like, maybe there could have been a bit of like sway, but you can't control having an older sibling. So like that's, yeah.
I just wanted like a cool older brother that had like cool older brother friends that would like drive you around in his car. I don't know. Yeah. That was the kind of stuff I thought about in grammar school, because my best friend Katie had a cool older brother, and I was like, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also, like, he was mean. Like, older brothers tease, or at least they did. So I don't know.
I don't know. I only have a younger sister, so I couldn't speak to that, but I can imagine. Yeah. Or I think even younger brothers tease, because my best friend has like twin younger brothers, and they definitely tease her.
They definitely tease. My mom grew up as the only girl with 3 brothers, and they teased the heck out of her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could say that unequivocally, 1,000%, she was teased relentlessly. Anyway, I'm going to ask you a question now, Jackie, that I ask all of my guests, and I'm curious to see what you're going to say. What do you think is the biggest modern mom problem today?
Honestly, I think, okay, so this is a great question, and I feel like I have like an immediate response, which is good. So it means I think for me, it's kind of twofold. I think the first thing is that we're so inundated with information. And in some ways it can be very good. In other ways it can be very detrimental, because I think for modern mothers, you always feel like you're not doing enough, or that you're doing all the wrong things. It's like on the one hand, you're being told to gentle parent. On the other hand, you're being told like that can actually ruin your child. And it's just, that's one example of many. but something that my mom did not grow up with is social media. And I say that as someone who is obviously active on social media and has like a relatively, robust following. But I just wonder if like things were probably easier for her back then in some ways, because, it was like there was no, other than those like parenting, books you would get at the library.
Like Dr. Spock.
There was nothing else out there. And so it's like they just kind of like, they just did whatever their heart desired. And there was just less pressure, I think, on parenting and especially on mothers back then. Other kinds of pressure, sure, but I think we are so inundated with information these days that it's hard to know if you're doing everything right or you're doing everything wrong and what that even means, because nothing is right and wrong, right? I mean, I think as long as you treat your child well, you're not, you're a good parent, but we're often told that we're not doing enough. So I would say that's the first thing. And it's probably the biggest thing, at least from my perspective. The second thing is also just like, it's time. Like there are never enough hours in the day. I work full time. So Only Hearts is my passion project and I'm trying to do more with it. And I have big ideas and I can tell you about those off of the podcast, but I'm committed to the work that I do. I lead communications for an international nonprofit. And then I'm also committed to this community that I'm building, have time for my child. Plus I like to take care of my health and my well-being and all of those things. I'm like, there's only so much time in the day. And I'm not suggesting, I feel like again, going back to like my type A personality and my always wanting to achieve certain things. Not everybody is like that. And honestly, in some ways, I don't think it's always great, but I find that there's moments where I'm like, I get overwhelmed because I'm like, I don't even know where to start and like where, how to allot my time. And I just turned 40 in the summer. And I also feel like the older I get, the faster time is going. And I feel this like pressure to just, perform and keep going and do more and do more. And I think all those things in some ways are like the perfect storm between all the information that I'm inundated with. And I will say one thing I do try to do with my account is not to make anyone feel like they're not good enough, or what they're doing is wrong. Like I really want to be honest and like I really do my best to have a really authentic voice in all of this. How people perceive that is up to them, but I'm always authentic in my voice. But I think it's like it's trying to like balance. And I use that term extremely loosely because I don't think there really is such a thing, but balance, like, being so overwhelmed with information, trying to do my best for my son, trying to do the best for myself and somehow make it all work. And that can be a really, really that's a tight line to be walking sometimes.
Yeah, that you absolutely nailed that 1,000%. Yes. Like you and I are so similar. It is frightening.
It must be the only child mama and us. Because it's funny, because even when I posted that thing about like my personality, the number of women that came back on like posts, like commented on that and they were like, sorry, like, are you the same? Are you me? Like, like, I feel like you're the same. We're the same person. And I'm like, of course we are, because like we a lot of us are like this. We just don't talk about it because we don't want to complain, we don't want to sound selfish, we don't want people to judge us. Like, but if this is who you are not alone. If you're type A, if you like your alone time, if you want to be able to do what you want to do, I think moms are so afraid to say that because for so long we've been told, if you are a mom, you need to be selfless. You cannot have things that you enjoy. You also, you see a lot of those videos and those memes out there too, where it's like, this is what I thought I would look like when I was a mom, but this is what I actually look like. And like, cool for you. But like, for me, it's like, I will not, like, this is just me. And I know that I know who I am. I'm very honest about who I am. If I'm going out, I am putting myself together. It's like, I was not feeling well last week either. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, but I'm going to get dressed up because I don't know who I'm going to run into in the neighborhood. And it's possible I'll run into people. And this is how I was raised, right? So I got dressed up. I didn't put on a gown, but I put on like a nice pair of jeans and a nice shirt. And I went outside and sure enough, I ran into a bunch of people that I knew. And I was like, of course, right? Of course. So it's like, but I also, I don't want, and I'm not saying that, you can't have multiple kids and still put yourself together, but is it a little easier to put yourself together when you have one? Like, that's like, yes, I'm like, I do care about that. I'm not gonna not be who I am And if I'm a bit vain, so be it. You know what I mean? Like I remember there was an episode, I think, or I know not everyone's a big fan of the Kardashians, but Khloe Kardashian said something funny recently. And I was like, yeah, amen, sister. Like basically she's like, give it all to me. She's like, I'll do anything. And like, I'm not going to do anything, but like, I'm trying to like maintain that sense of youth. Now that I'm 40, I think 40 for me was this very weird transitionary period because I'm like, wow, I'll never have my 30s again. My 30s were so brilliant. You know, I had my son, I was doing all these amazing things. 40 feels like a page that is turning for me. But I'm holding on to like my youth. I'm holding on to the things that I loved doing, you know, when I was in my 30s. And I hope to carry that youthfulness into my 40s. So I have the vanity, I have all those things, and I'm not willing to give that up. If it means having, you know, a bigger family, if it means being more selfless, I'm not willing to do that. And that's just me. And I'm not going to make any apologies for that.
I love how unapologetic you are. And being in your 40s, let me just tell you, as somebody is firmly in her 40s, that's what your 40s are all about. It's being 1000% you unapologetically.
Love it. Love it.
Jackie, you are so fantastic. I could chat with you all day. Tell everyone where we could follow your account and tell us all the things.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm mainly on Instagram. So you can follow the account at The Only Hearts. It's actually a play on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club from the Beatles, which is like my favorite band. And I have a website too. It's theonlyhearts.com, but it's being reworked right now. So stay tuned because there's lots more really good stuff that's coming.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I love that. Jackie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Tara. It was really great to chat with you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you can head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow. Or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.